Welcome, Solo of the Month. My name is Matthew Allison, your host for the evening, where we'll be looking at Gary Schocker's Easing Up from his newly accessible Solo Suite number 2. So, Gary Schocker has, believe it or not, almost 1,800 pieces of music that he's written, which is way more than and this is already going to be a lot, 300 pieces of music he has published for Flute. I think there's 600 publications total, but 300 for Flute. So we have only ever seen a small fraction of the pieces that he's written, and he's going to start having some of them accessible in like handwritten manuscript form on his website, and he'll be doing crowdfunding. So if a piece of music gets enough attention, he'll pay to have it like put in and be typeset nicely. But he does have a lot of music up there already. If you browse his website for more music that you can digitally download and purchase that way to support a living composer and play some really awesome music. So first and foremost, thank you, Gary, for allowing Solo of the Month free access to your Easing Up this month. And for giving us all a discount to your digital downloads. So for the month of March, it does end at the end of March. You can use the code for 20% off your digital downloads, and you can use that code up to 2 times within the month of March, whichever happens to end first. So we are in Easing Up, which is the second movement of 4 of Solo Suite number 2. The first movement is titled A Little After Dark, and it's nice and low at first. It's cool and creepy. The second movement, Easing Up, which is great. And what we'll be working on, the third movement is called Tender, and it sounds like it's described. And of course, you can look on his website for full recordings and YouTube. And the fourth movement is called Tricky, and I'm not even going to try to sight read that today because I haven't looked through it. And it starts with the 16th note rest, and I just don't have the confidence tonight that I'm going to give it any credible demonstration. So go ahead and look it up. If you haven't yet noticed, on the free download that you all have, let me share my screen. On the free download, it should be 3 pages long. The first page is the first page of the suite of the Easing Up movement. Second page is 2 pages long. But the third page is if you've happened to make it past the double bar line. There are a few links embedded here, including a video lesson, and we might talk about that a little bit in tonight's class, a performance of it, and some other digital download options, and the reminder of the code for if you just type in Matthew at checkout, you get 20% off the music there. So check out that last page. It's got some really great links. It talks about private lessons with Gary. It also talks about his monthly masterclass. And then his website will have information about his summer event coming up pretty soon too. So looking at Easing Up, the second movement, let's start by just doing a little bit of warming up together. And I'm not going to take the whole time talking about what I would do to warm up for it. But I do think warming up is a really great thing for us to all do. So let's start by just playing a couple of 5-note scale patterns. And we are talking Taffanelli Gobert number 1. I know some of you use my scale book. I think it's the second pattern in my book. Whatever you might be using, we're just going to do a couple of them. And I want you to flip to then the E major, E, F sharp, G sharp, A, B, and we'll do the main octave. And I'll turn my original sound for musicians on. And give that a play or two. E, F sharp, G sharp, A, B, A, G sharp, F sharp, E. And then take the same thing. Well, not just yet, actually. We'll make life easier on everyone. Let's do E flat major. Going down a half step. E flat, F, G, A flat, B flat. And I could have gone in a more familiar order for you all. Sorry. And lastly, give your F major, F, G, A, B flat, C. A little play. And before we do A minor and E minor, let's take those 3 and do them up the octave. And this is why I wanted you to play them. So E flat major in the top octave. couple of times, as slowly as need be. Sorry, my dog is moving the desk, because yes, he does weigh more than the furniture does. And if you take a glance at measure, for example, 45, those notes way up there, which might look scary when they're written on paper, are just notes of that E flat major 5-note scale pattern that you just practiced. What? You're meaning to tell me that the thing I'm using to warm up is actually in the music and doing it will make it easier? Yes, I am. All right, same thing with E major up high, E, F sharp, G sharp, A, B. Give that a couple of goes. So that E major 5-note pattern, you are going to see that reflected in measure 8 to 9, and every time that comes back, measure 41 to 42, measure 58 to 59, etc. And then lastly, let's take that F major one up high, and yes, we are going to a high C. Give that a couple of goes. I know it's crackling in my own headphones right now when I play up that high. So hopefully your ears are nicely protected. And that F major 5-note, if you look at measure 42 and 43, where we move from the C, C, B flat, A, G, I mean, heck, you are going to be so versed in that. So if you take that same scale warm-up, Taffnell and Gilbert number 1, or whatever your 5-note pattern of choice is, that you've probably done plenty of times in your life, and you apply that to this piece of music, it becomes much, much less intimidating. And then for some of the low register stuff, of course, you might want to keep doing that, but let's add a couple of minor thoughts in here. Let's do the A minor 5-note, A, B, C natural, D, E. Which might be what we're arriving to when we get to the downbeat of the 3rd measure, and every time that happens. And then lastly, the E minor 5-note pattern, E, F sharp, G, A, B. E, F sharp, G, A, B. And you can do it in all 3 octaves if you want, but focusing on the main octave first. And voila, those are notes that you see in the very first measure. So essentially we practiced the technique necessary for all of the non-16th note technical things in this piece, right? In a couple of minutes. So everything that you see that is that kind of hip melody, it's based on the notes that you just played, and when you get to the music, hopefully it feels that much more accessible. That makes sense to anybody? To everybody? Is there anything that you want to talk about in those 5-note patterns? They're pretty straightforward for most players by now. The other thing that I would do to warm up this piece would be the undertone harmonics, and I know I feel like a broken record now because I talk about it every month. I think undertone harmonics are the solution to most of life's problems. So let's finger that high E flat, every single finger. We're going to finger the high note, but rather than, for example, for harmonics, you finger the low note and begin to overblow it. We're going to finger the high note and purposefully underblow it. So with that E flat fingering, high E flat, every finger, thinking jaw loose, throat open, and you'll get not the high E flat sound, but get that low sound first. We're going to take it to a middle pitch, and this is going to be the important one. You're going to want to skip it, so go slow. And try to make going from the low sound to that slightly more tonal middle pitch just feel as smooth and easy as possible. And then here is the magic. You can leave your throat and mouth in that shape and float up to the high E flat, and I guarantee your tone will be warmer and your pitch will be more stable and settled. It takes all of the tension that we built up over years of trying so hard to play those high notes when we were kids and just never unpracticed the habit of tensing up or rolling in or tightening up or whatever may have happened. Let's do the same thing with E. We'll just quickly go through them. If anybody has a question, you just unmute yourself and shout out. But the high E, thumb 1, 2, 1, 2, pinky. a nice husky sound to start. And then from that husky sound, we'll take it up to that middle pitch. Which sounds like an A flat, but that's not relevant right now. And then from that middle pitch with little to no change, we'll do it on the high F fingering, thumb 1, 3, 1, pinky, and I'm just gonna bring my tuner around because I just love how big of a difference this makes. So the husky sound first. Take it to the middle. I'm not worrying about intonation on these ghost notes, but then this one. High notes become happier, right? F sharp, thumb 1, 3, 3, pinky. Again, no thumb B flat for high F sharp. High G, 1, 2, 3, pinky, no thumb. High A flat. High A, thumb 2, 1, pinky. High B flat, we're almost there. High C, thumb 1, 3, second control key, pinky's good. And then high C, 1, 2, 3 for 1. You can choose to use a gizmo or not, depending on your flute. All right, so first thing, who felt like they were having some success with that, and you would unmute yourself and demonstrate so that way we can hear the way that you're approaching those. Can be any one of them, the high C, the low E flat. Beth, I see you raise your hand. Let's hear it. Some Beth.
Okay, I'm going to do one that's really hard for me, which is E.
Fantastic. Awesome. Did you notice how when you arrived at the E, it sounded a bit lower in pitch, and then the longer you sustained the E, the more that the pitch went up and you started to drive it? So I think it'd be great if you do it one more time for us, but then just trust in yourself that you already arrived and leave it in that more relaxed, lower pitch place. To me, the pitch sounded more stable. Did it feel that way to other people too? And the important question is, Beth, how did it feel to you that time?
Good. It was more,
Good.
it stayed down, yeah.
Yeah. So do you think that'd be something that'd be worth practicing to just keep finding trust in the relaxed sense of those high notes?
Sure. No, it would be.
Sure. Whatever
It's
you
the
say,
believing
Matthew.
and the trust.
Fantastic, Beth. Thank you so much. Would anybody else like to share out either success, or if you're struggling with like, this doesn't make any sense to me, would you be willing to demonstrate that too? We're all friends here and we all learn together, right?
I'll do a G sharp, which I hate my G sharps.
All right, let's hear it, Lisa.
Okay.
Good. So, did everybody in the camera notice that when Lisa went to the high G sharp, her eyebrows tightened a little bit and her head even like made like I don't want to do this kind of thing? And Lisa, you might not have noticed it, but your inner 12-year-old or whenever you learn G sharp for the first time just shook its head, right? So say, okay, 12-year-old, I hear you, but I'm an adult now. Try it again and see if you can approach this G sharp without that mindset of it's your bad note or the one that you don't like, but instead you're approaching it from a new place and looking at it from a different place, and maybe you'll discover something new about it too.
Okay.
Better. Do it one more time. See if you can find even more trust that G sharp is no longer your bad note.
No.
So a little tightening that time again. Uh-huh. Are you able to see yourself?
Yeah, well, I'm not looking, but...
You're not looking? Yeah, that one actually still sounded better. So it sounds like it's getting more comfortable. But that time I saw your clavicle lift up here a little bit when you got to that G sharp. So just look at yourself and say, I can do this.
Okay. Once more?
Yeah, but say the words. You did the sigh. I can do this.
No, that's worse.
So what I want for you is to start just discovering a new relationship with the high notes. It doesn't have to be every high note. If most of them are speaking fine for you, then don't worry about them, right? You already have a good relation with that. But the fact that if you're going to come on camera and say G sharp is not a note that works for me very often, like, let's figure out why. And maybe it's a flute. Maybe you're never going to be able to play it. I don't think it's the case. Or maybe you're just holding on to some kind of tension from before. We do that in music and we do that in so many other things. Try a note that is more pleasant for you and then try the G sharp. Is there a high note that you love?
High note that I love. B flat, maybe. Sometimes.
Does that feel easier? Yeah, and I really don't think you need to contract harder for that top octave. Sorry, mine's quite flat, but going between the two allow more of a sense of a natural smearing or a bridging between the two of them. That felt better. Let's go back to the G sharp.
No.
That sounded much better that time too.
Yeah,
Did it feel any better?
Yeah, it did.
Yeah. Good, good. So I really love this exercise. It has become one of my daily tone exercises now too. And I think if you try it on every now and again, or every day for a week or two, then I think you'll get much more comfortable with the process itself. And then when you are able to smear from that middle note to the top octave with doing almost no work, the flute wants to go to the higher sound. It wants to. And then you just let it float up there. And so much tension can be taken away. Great, Lisa. Any other questions or comments about that exercise? Would anybody care to share out their success or their struggle so we can all learn together? Feeling satisfied with that exercise? All right, so the first thing I'd like to ask, are there any specific parts of this piece that somebody wants to make sure that we talk about and then talk about it right now?
Yeah, I want to talk about breathing. Do you have to do that whole first phrase in one breath?
If you don't, Ruth, what's going to happen?
I really don't know because, you listen to Gary play it and, he's playing it very relaxed and So it seems like it should be one phrase,
Yeah,
but
he
it
does
doesn't.
make it. He makes it sound so lovely as one phrase, but his point behind this is to give a sense of letting things feel a little bit relaxed.
Mhm.
So to him, that he's using no tension and just has doesn't have to use so much air to make sound on the flute because he plays so freely, but he's also really developed his control and his breathing so
Mhm.
much. He's been working with a top flute teacher since he was a teenager, and so um, we also have to accept, by we I mean I also have to accept, I'm not going to play it the way that Gary, I'm not going to be able to play it the way that Gary plays it, or my way is going to be a little different. So Ruth, now I want to ask you, if you take breaths, where do you like the places for you to breathe? What sounds best?
Well, yeah, there's smaller phrases there, and I think that's just supposed to have that. It's not supposed to be heavy. That's what he talked about in his video.
Mm-hmm.
Keeping it light.
So just a quick question, a quick poll. Is anybody playing from the beginning to the rest in measure 7 without taking a breath? I did it once today, and it took. So, in order for me to do it, I had to do my little trick of like inhale for 3 beats through my nose, and then take a beat in, a breath in through my mouth, and then just actually play piano. And the crescendo, I didn't really increase dynamic very much. I just sped up my vibrato a little bit, or something like that. So it took a
Yeah.
lot of planning. And then when that same thing came back in the middle of the piece and the end of the piece, I was not getting it in one breath again. So part of my ego says I should at least do that very first breath, that first double phrase in one breath, because that's how I heard Gary do it, and so I want to be known that I can do it too. And part of me thinks it sounds just fine to breathe in lots of places. So,
Mhm.
Ruth, will you demonstrate the first couple of phrases, and then we can all talk about where we might put in some breath marks in case we want to breathe? I'm not even going to use the need word. I'm going to say in case we choose to breathe.
Okay. But I think you hit the nail on the head about the dynamic. If you're not playing mezzo something, you probably could do it in that amount of time. You didn't want me to go on, or did you?
That's fantastic right there already, Ruth. So we can do the next part in a bit. So where Ruth took a breath was in measures 4 after the tied D. And I think that makes a lot of sense to breathe there. What I'm going to maybe also invite that we try is taking a breath between the two slurs. I don't know if your version has in measure 1, 2, 3. Does your first slur go to measure 3 and then the second one go beyond that? The only reason I'm going to suggest that we do that is because when he writes this same phrase again later, that break is there every time, and then the slur over. So if you're only going to take one breath, Ruth, can we try taking the breath in that first place, which doesn't feel as natural because it feels like you're interrupting the phrase, but I kind of suspect he was being a little bit sneaky with thinking, I want people to continue this to the next phrase. Let's hear it, Ruth. Give it a try. Right there. Mm-hmm. So yeah, breathing before in the first one. Do you see where the break of the slurs is?
I think so. So that was the third bar.
In the third bar, yeah, we have A, D, and then take a breath before the C, B flat. Yep. And when you look at the same material, when you see it at measure 17, he's got breaths in both of those places because he wrote the rests in, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. when you see this material come back in measure 33, then he's got the slur like we just did, but then it's a shorter second phrase. And then we see at the recap area, measure 51, he's got the rest written in there again. So I think where you took the breath this time makes sense. When I play it slower, which sometimes I do, because easing up, depending on the time of day, might not feel quarter note equals 76 to me, I also think it sounds fine to have even more breaths than that. So I think taking a breath after any of those ties makes perfect sense musically because it keeps that kind of churning going forward, just like you're, casually walking down the street or whatever. And I think all of them are options that are going to work just fine for you. So when you took the breath in measure 3, it didn't seem like you felt as comfortable getting through to measure 9. But maybe with a little bit of doing it a few times, that confidence will gain. And I can talk about, I have a little trick for that too that I can talk about later. But let's see, would anybody else like to also play that opening phrase and maybe try a couple of different breath places or see where the breath naturally falls for you? Yeah, Nathan. Yeah, fantastic. So Nathan had a similar breath, but then he also took one on the bar line right before 5. And I think that sounds fine. If you're going to do that breath, you might even consider easing back in the time a little bit to accommodate it. This is an unaccompanied piece. Or maybe you don't need that much of a dramatic pause, but make sure that the breath also feels easy, right? Does that make sense? So if you're playing easy feeling notes, but then you have tense feeling breaths, you're still inviting a little bit of that tension in. So let's have everything be easy. Can you try that where I just started, Nathan, on the C, B flat C, and then take just a tiny bit of rallentando on that tenutoed C natural D, so that way your breath sounds like you're purposefully putting it there.
Which measure? Which measure?
You can start at the beginning if that's easiest, but at that measure 4 on beat 3, you see how there's a tenuto line over that C natural? Imagine that's a little bit of a rallentando on that last CD, so that way you're just slowing down a tiny bit before you take the breath, so that way it's kind of like showing the audience that you're going to restart. Yeah, so I think it's absolutely appropriate in this. If you're going to breathe on the bar line there between 4 and 5, to use that C natural tenuto and imagine just a hint of tenuto, a hint of rallentando. Does that make sense to everybody? Mm-hmm. Does anybody else have a different breath that they'd like to show or demonstrate or try out? Or perhaps you were doing something different and you want to try one of the things that Nathan or Ruth already showed for us. Yes, Lynn.
All right.
Now, Lynn, I don't think your audio is coming. Yeah, Lynn, it sounds like.
I can't hear you.
Yeah.
I think my connection's not good.
Yeah, it sounded like there's some kind of buffering that happened in the middle of that. It seems like it's caught up, though. This is what I'd like for you to try. As much as I want to see your face in just a second, when you demonstrate playing, would you turn your camera off just to see if that speeds up the sound for us a little bit? And then when you're done playing...
So I would hit stop video?
I'm not
sure how to turn my camera off.
Yes, just tap that and you can turn it right back on when you're done playing, but that might speed up the the technology a little bit for us.
Okay. Shall we do it again?
Yep. All right, and come back to us, Lynn. That was much better. We heard you for much longer, at least. I was able to. So you took the breath between the slurs and then the bar line breath. Did both of those feel good? Yeah, did great. You're back now. Did all those feel good? Those breaths that you took?
Yeah. Except
Good.
I snuck a quick one in before my second breath.
Yeah. Okay. So where did you sneak
I
that
didn't
one
mean
in?
to, but I did it.
And that's super common for us to do things that we don't need to do. So in playing the
Yeah.
flute, we do need to practice breathing. I prefer to do most of my like big breath stuff where I'm going to try to like expand my lung capacity or expand my exhale. I prefer to do most of that away from the flute because sometimes when I'm holding a little extra empty, I get fear kicks in, right? So let's all of us
Right.
take a deep breath in and blow out all of your air and stay empty for a second. And we have to get to the place in our mind that we're not like panicking, right? And maybe while you're empty, you can blow out a little bit more air. And we have to gain a new relationship with this less full lung. We can't actually get empty. And then I'm going to go ahead and inhale because I was starting to get tired of holding empty. And then if you can apply that with like your just breathing, like the Pat Sheridan breathing gym kind of stuff, the make your exhales longer and longer and longer and longer as you're working that way. And then come back to the flute. Because we don't want to get too tense when we play the flute. I went through a phase where I was doing my long tones and holding them past where I was comfortable. But then I felt my throat tightening up and like the back of my neck tightening up, and all of these things were happening. My logic was if I can hold these notes past where I'm comfortable, then I'll have that extra little bit of fuel. But it wasn't worth it for me to invite that tension in. Does anybody else have a thought about what I just said about like practicing to empty on the flute versus practicing to empty on not the flute? Does anybody like to take it to nothing on the flute like that? Yeah, it's not comfortable. So it can be scary. And another thing with the goals, and since both of you had goals in mind first, I like to start from the goal. That way I know how I'm arriving. So that high E, if every time we get to the high E right before the rest, we're out of breath and we're panicked, we're going to be afraid of that high E every single time. So start with that E. No problem. I love that E. And then just hold it forever, right? And then add a note. You can go note by note, maybe go measure by time. So I'm holding the note much longer, obviously, than I need to, right? It's two 16th notes tied together. I'm holding it for a really long time. So that way I've just told myself, not only can I do measures 3.5, 4, 5, 6, and 7.5 in one breath, but I could do much, much more than that. And so I don't need to be afraid. But I'm starting from that target E, so that way I'm also approaching that E from a place of, this feels like home. I've already been here. This feels comfortable. This feels natural. I've been on this E 6 times now. I'm going to go another note further. I've been to this E 7 times now. I know that E. It's a piece of cake. We're best buds now, right? So it's part of the inner game of playing for that the mindset of the flute. Let's see. Lisa typed in any tips for a really sharp E. So undertone harmonics. I can't say how much I think that's going to change your relationship with your high notes and take tension away. Harmonics are always great. You can finger the low E and the A fingerings for that, and the low C too will get you to the high E. But for a quick fix of high E, lifting the right pinky, I used to always do that until I stopped. And I like saying that because I thought it wasn't until I stopped thinking I needed to do it that I didn't need to do it. But as long as I thought I needed to lift that right pinky to bring my pitch down on the E, I did. And once I stopped thinking I needed to lift the pinky for the right pinky for the high E, I didn't need to anymore. So Lisa, I think I don't know. Can we we'll go around the group and ask if anybody has any other opinions besides the undertone harmonics and lifting pinky if necessary. Any other thoughts for the high E intonation?
I have a suggestion for, I don't know, bringing the pitch down but finding a more stable E. This was suggested to me where you can actually, on the foot joint, add, if you decide to keep the pinky on, you can add the C sharp spatula at the same time so that you are, as you're opening the backside of the D sharp key, you're also closing the first hole of the foot joint, so it kind of counteracts a little bit in terms of balance in the lower part of the instrument. So you can finger the high E by putting your pinky on both of those keys at the same time. So I'm actually pressing down not just the D sharp, but also the C sharp spatula at the same time. So it helps make that higher E a little bit more stable. And then you can work with the tuner that way to also... This is with the pinky off. And here's with both. So I'm doing the D sharp key and the C sharp at the same time. It's much stronger in tone color as well.
Yeah, nice. I've used that pinky key for some of the other high notes, but I don't know that I've ever used it on that high E before. So I'd like to take 5 seconds and try that myself. So everyone play for a second, because talk amongst yourselves.
That same double fingering helps stabilize it in the middle register too. That's kind of a gnarly note right there at the transition.
Good point. And in that middle register, I think it has less of a tone color difference than the trill key lean that some people do. So that's great to keep in mind too. All right, wonderful. And Lisa, I have on the Practice Flute YouTube station, there's a E is for easy YouTube video. I think there's like 2 other things that I suggest to practice for high E. I don't honestly remember what they are, but you might see if you can find that E is for easy video on the Practice Flute YouTube. Great. Any other
I had no idea how sharp my E was until I was playing along while you were playing, and oh my God, when I hit an E and you hit an E, it was.
And there is no shame there, because upper register and flutes, it's hard for us, all of us. And then high E is just one of those notes that wants to be so sharp all the time. That's why I don't know how many people lift their pinky for high E and how many don't. But it looked like everybody was lifting their pinky for a high E when I was in school, at least. So I don't know about nowadays. Nick, you're playing professionally. Do you use it a lot or sometimes, or?
Pretty standardly, I play high E without the pinky. So, being nice and polite and pinky up. But depending on dynamic and blend, maybe if I'm playing with piccolo at the same time or clarinets behind me, it's nice to be able to have that dexterity to either slap the pinky down last minute or hit the C sharp in tandem. So yeah, being very flexible on that note is key.
And for me, it wasn't an ego thing of like, I want to be able to do it with leaving the pinky down. For me, it's for having the pinky down helps with the stability of the instrument for me when I'm doing fast passages in the upper register. that I just assume move as few fingers as possible. So it was necessary for me because my technique's probably not as clean as Nix's. So, any other questions about that opening part or high E, upper notes? Anything else? Somebody like to play their phrasing? Nobody's jumping out just yet. I see Beth raise her hand. And Brenda, were you about to say maybe I'll play? No? Beth, what would you like to play?
I could play the beginning if you want, or go on from the E.
Sure, keep going as much as you like this time. Gorgeous playing, Beth. Really nicely done.
Oh, thanks.
I'm going to first say or ask you, what about your playing did you like or love? What were you proud of?
Love. Oh. I'm really happy overall with my high register. Nick and I have worked on this. um, so I'm pretty happy overall with it, and I felt like it was fairly full, and like I'll say the lower tones were coming through most of the time.
Yeah, it had great resonance. And I wanted to say that I was really proud of noticing something in you, too. A lot of flute players have the tendency for their head to follow the topography of the music, or the head move in the direction of their eyes. You stayed so, like, present in the phrase, in the direction of the air, versus doing something like, like people tend to do. So bravo because I could feel that you were thinking of the air going through the phrase versus the air following the shape of the notes. Anybody else notice that? I thought that was great. I don't know. Teacher nerd moment right there. Or does anybody notice themselves also sometimes following the shape of the music that way? Yeah. And for a leap from the octave B natural, that kind of head pop is probably going to make us sharper. So that stability that Beth just demonstrated, bravo. I think it sounded great. Were there anything about that you want to talk about or still ask? Your teacher's in the room with us too, so...
I'll go with measure 10, and that E did not speak immediately.
Mm-hmm.
The one in 14 spoke a lot quicker, but it was still a little delayed.
Yeah, and so is that interval from G sharp to E different than... Where is it in 14? It's G sharp to E in 14 also. It's the same interval both times.
Mm-hmm.
Do you ever practice just playing that interval?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
I did.
Great. And actually, Lisa, I think this is on that high E's for easy thing. I might talk about more Marcel Moise's De la Sonorité, the growing intervals exercise. Target high E. Etc. Slowly. Sorry, that wasn't in the right fingering. Etc. And just kind of growing the intervals, doing the articulations that he suggests to gain a little bit more deeper relationship with the E, but also that specific interval. So going back and forth. Any other things that you've practiced, Beth, to work that interval?
Not specifically for that. But I like the thought of essentially working De la Sonorité with using the E as the pivot, like everything goes off of that E.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe, I think that's what you were saying.
Yeah, doing the whole...
Yeah.
All of it on using E as the pivot note, yep.
Yeah.
And I think it's a great idea for us to do it on E, on high F sharp, on any of these notes that we don't have as good of relationship with. They're like the extended family on the flute sometimes. You tolerate them when you need to, but it'll help us get a better relationship. Harmonics are always fun to practice too. And that high G sharp you could theoretically play with an A flat fingering, and then the high E you could theoretically play with an A fingering. You know, it might just be fun to do that fingering a few times. Because harmonics, one of the things that makes harmonics useful is they tend to be more resistant. And so when we go back to the real fingerings, we've kind of like done a little bit of body building of the embouchure, and it just feels a little bit easier then. So try the A flat and A fingering. Yeah, so good. So now we're going to take the A flat and take it to the next harmonic up. So let's just finger the A flat first. And get to the top A flat. And mine's super flat, but sorry. Yeah. Yeah, we could do it with a couple of different fingerings. Also, let's see. We could do... No way. Low E fingering should do both. I never practiced that high of harmonic, and the lip, my wood, I don't do it as well on wood as the metal, but finger a low E and try doing between the high A flat and the high E with that fingering. Yeah, so what we're doing, Room, is we're using harmonics instead of just being a generic warm-up. Beth is isolating the interval that was not super comfortable for her to play. Now that you've done it so much harder than it normally is, Beth, would you play those phrases again and see if it just happens to feel any easier this time?
Just the G sharp to E or the whole phrase?
Play the phrase. Yeah, let it be in context.
Oh, yeah.
Great, great. That felt a little bit easier?
Oh, yeah, I definitely felt like that the E, I wasn't fighting myself and the E came out.
And do you know what the amazing thing about practicing is? Some of it is you got better, and some of it is you trusted yourself more, right? And that's
Yeah.
what's hard for us to discover sometimes. We could do something over and over thousands of times, and if we don't begin to trust ourselves, it's always going to be hard. So doing the repetition, doing variations around it, just gives you more opportunity to trust that yes, you can in fact do it. You can in fact do something way harder than that. So great job, Beth. Really, really nicely
Thank
done.
you. Thanks, Matt.
Yeah. Anybody else like to play out something or have any more comments about that interval or high E's or anything along those lines? Joan. Up, yep. Sound's not working today? Okay. Let's also just take a glance while we're together at the 16th note section, which I think is what the assignment for this week is to start looking at those, right? And I haven't yet too much. But it looks like we've got like a lot of minor 7 patterns here. So again, if you're practicing your scale patterns and your arpeggio patterns, G, B flat, D, F sharp. Okay, a nice little arpeggio there. The next measure, F, A flat, C, E natural. That's another minor 7. The E flat, G flat, B flat, D. Another E flat minor with the 7 on there. So those are all arpeggios that you'll find in your Taffanella Gobert or whatever your scale arpeggio book of choice is. And then once I've practiced the scale patterns away from the music, so that way I'm not afraid of them when it comes to music, I like to take off littlest bites as possible. So I would do a beat plus a note or a beat to beat. So 1E and a 2, 2E and a 3, 3E and a 1, and then it's 5/8, but I'm going to still call it 1E and a 2 just for now. So doing a beat plus a note, and then I see I just completed a slur, so I put that together. feels very much like um, Mission Impossible music to me right now, and I totally dig it. And I just kind of realized that, and I want to play it again with like Sinister Eyes or something like that. This is a great piece where I have a note to myself, and I haven't done it yet. Oops. But I wrote a note to myself saying mark in all accidentals because I remember thinking it was not always easy to remember that like the F sharp and B flat are good the entire measure, and then in measure 27 that it's still coming down that E minor with a B flat, G flat, E flat. So I think E goes to rinse them out and go ahead and mark all of the carried accidentals through a whole measure. Yeah, Rachel.
Am I unmuted?
Mm-hmm.
I have a question about going into that phrase. The pickup has a B natural, and then all of a sudden you have three measures with B flat minor arpeggios where it's really handy to put your lever on, but you have to slide super fast. And then at what is it, 28, you need to slide back off, but you have to do all that really quickly. Do you recommend trying to use the lever, the thumb B flat, or should you try to wing it without that?
That's a really tricky question. In this particular case, I'm doing a thumb B flat slide. It's
Okay.
much more comfortable for me than doing the lever reach. But when I play thumb B flat, I don't ever switch all the way onto the B flat key. I start on my B key and I just lean, so I'm just kind of moving my thumb
Ah,
slightly that way. So I press both keys at the same time, so it's not as big of a movement for me as it would be if I were like picking it up and totally moving it. So that might be something to consider too. I don't know how that feels in people's thumb joints, but I press both keys when I play thumb B flat so that way I can get off of it when I need to. How would lever
hmm.
feel there? So lever's tricky for me because the note after the B flat is a D, and so I'd have to smear off the lever to get to the D key. So in this case, I think either using your F key, 1 and 1 B flat, which I can't do. I'll just go ahead and admit it right now. There's no way that I would play that cleanly using the 1 and 1 B flat.
Yeah, I get the flippy fingers and I start getting the blipping when I try it that way. So,
So I think maybe trying to maybe keep the thumb B flat just a little bit closer to your thumb B key, so that way you can just slide onto it. Any other suggestions for the B flats in those couple of measures? Is anybody doing successfully something different?
I can make a suggestion. I would also use the thumb B flat all the way through measure 27, but I think in getting the thumb to coordinate in a slide is really key, no pun intended, again, so that when we're going from the E flat, the last note of measure 27, that's when I would then slide because I'm also sliding my pinky down for the C sharp. So if I can get my fingers to be coordinated and think about like my inside fingers, right? My pinky is sort of on the back side of the instrument. My thumb is on the sort of inside of the instrument closest to me. So if I can just practice that motion away from the flute also, like resting the flute on my shoulder and just making sure that my thumb and my pinky can be coordinated in that slide together, then you're getting two fingers to move at the same time rather than thinking, oh, I have to slide the thumb and I also have to do this. Like, it's hard enough that we have to like make this
right.
tube make noise, right? So the more that we can practice away from the instrument, also getting our fingers coordinated is really helpful. So I would even just practice that measure alone, even the last beat. E flat, B flat, G flat, E flat, slide both fingers at the same time for a C sharp. So then you're already set up for the B natural in that measure.
So Rachel, let's take what Nick is advising, and I absolutely agree. Let's start with the E flat, and then play C sharp and move both fingers. So start with it. Maybe just looking at your fingers do it. So your thumb and pinky are sliding in opposite direction, which is kind of
Oh,
hard for the
off the
brain.
flute.
Yeah, without playing for a second, just sliding the thumb toward you and your pinky away from you simultaneously. And then just do that one interval.
It's really easy to get that.
Yeah, you're wanting to lift your pinky, and everybody knows that you can take oil from your nose or forehead or behind your ear or whatever it might be to lube up that foot joint. Um, and
That'll
then
take
maybe
some
add
work.
one note starting the G flat. Again, you are on your thumb B flat for the G flat. And I'm sorry, I was saying the wrong thumb movement with the pinky movement. So the pinky and thumb and pinky are both moving away from you. And then add the B flat.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. That's going to take a lot of repetition to get it in my head.
It's going to take a bit of repetition, but just think how many more times you'll be able to use that thumb slide, right? It's going to be useful in so many things. So this is the first time you've needed to practice it. And because it's going to be a newer skill, I think what Nick was saying of practicing it away from music is especially important now, because you're not going to just want to apply it to this piece of music. You're going to want to apply it to other things later. And so if you learn that skill of sliding the thumb, and especially the thumb and pinky at the same time, then you're going to be much more likely to pick that pattern up of something that you know that you can do when you need it on a piece of music in the future. I haven't looked at next month's piece yet, but it sounds like it goes pretty low, so we might have to do even next month. Who knows? That we'll have to do something like that. Great question, though, because I know
That's a
that's something
great
that's...
tip. I appreciate the tip.
Yeah, thanks, Nick, for that.
No problem. I do that a lot, actually, because it's so weird for us. I mean, I think almost every other instrument can see their fingers while they're playing, but ours are like off to the side, like, so we don't have that peripheral vision really of our fingers. So by resting the flute on our shoulder and bringing our fingers out in front, we can really find sometimes where our fingers are bobbling or they're not entirely coordinated, but we can also see where sometimes those fingers need to move in the same direction at the same time. So it's a great way to ergonomically practice the technique of the flute as well.
Yes, perfect. And actually, with learning this section, I think that would be something I would highly advise. So in like my beginning flute book, I talk about counting rhythms and saying the notes, and then saying the notes and fingering before you even play. And with my little kiddos, I have them do this. With my big kiddos, I have them do this too. So going from measure 25 and saying the notes and pointing your flute directly at the music so you can't help but see what your fingers are doing. G, B flat, D, F sharp, A, G, F sharp, G, D, B flat, G, F, A flat, C, E, G, F, E, F, E flat, G flat, B flat, D, F, E flat, D, E flat, B flat, G flat, E flat, C sharp, E, G sharp, B, E, G sharp, B, D sharp, C sharp, E, G sharp, B, B flat. I know taking the time to say the notes and then a second time to say the notes and finger it, and then a third time to play it seems like a lot of wasted time. But if you first translate the music, and then translate the music into a movement, and then translate the music into notes, movement, and something expressive, it gives the mind much more time to actually realize what it is that you were asking it to do, which is quite complicated. That's why musicians are so smart, right? All right, any other questions in learning this piece?
Well, what about those the fingerings for those super high notes? And the end of the second line where it starts from a B to a B and an A and a G sharp and...
That's a really good question. So you're going to be so familiar with those fingers once you do your E major 5-note scale pattern a few times every day. Although that does bring up something that I wanted to give a little advice for. In measure 12, this is the only time it happens in the piece, and I don't know, you never know with the composer if it's on purpose or not, but it goes from an F sharp to a B natural. There's 3 ways that one could do that. The left hand is the same, thumb 1, 3, and the pinky can stay down. The difference is the right hand. So you can, if you finger the F sharp with your third finger, you can either slide onto the trill key, which I used to do as a child but don't find comfortable. You can finger the long F sharp and then use your middle finger for the trill key. Or what I probably suggest now, because so many flute players use the middle finger for the high F sharp now, is to finger the high F sharp, thumb 1, 3, 2 pinky, and then all you're doing is switching your to your trill key for the high B natural. Versus, right? So that might be something, and in my music, I am not one who usually uses middle finger F sharp. That is something I used to do, but now don't do because for my playing, it sounds too flat and stuffy a lot of the times. So when I need to do it, I write the letter M above the F sharp for middle finger. It's important that everybody establish their own kind of like shorthand notation. I see with my young kids especially, it's funny. They just want to write like a paragraph on their music. I'm like, you're not gonna have time to read that. Just like write, like make up a symbol and decide this means this. So if I write a capital M above an F sharp, it always means finger it with my middle finger. I think that was the only place where there was a fingering trick that I thought was useful. And yeah, for these low finger patterns, look at Marcel Moy's Etude, a exercise technique studies. Oh, it went away. I don't know how to find the chat again. I don't know. I'm reading out loud because I don't know if the chat's copy over to the video for the group. Sean
That's a good
suggested for
point.
these low finger patterns, look up Marcel Moy's Etude, a exercise technique studies and technical exercise, and try number 2. It's brutal, but also great. And I guess I could have had Sean read it, and then it would have been in Sean's voice. But yeah,
Maybe
great
next
tip,
time.
Sean. Do you say maybe next time?
Yeah. I
Sean's voice
I
would be the
think it's
narration.
public domain now because a lot of Moise's stuff has flipped over public domain, so it's worth looking up.
Which is so nice because my first Marcel Moyes book, I remember it was like we had to import it from France, or at least my mom thought. She's like, that was $40 and it's only 9 pages long, and I was like, it's what my teacher told me to get. I don't know, it's so sad. So I'm glad that some of these amazing resources are becoming public domain.
And
Does
as long as
anybody else
I
have it?
have the camera on for the high finger exercises, Tafnell and Gobert exercise number 7.
Is that the where it's like an art? Sorry, it's not scale, but an
Yeah,
arpeggio
it's
that
patterns, and it's if you play it up an octave from written, then you get all of these really delightfully difficult 4 and 5 note patterns up in the top range.
Wonderful. And just from hearing a couple of people play their 5 note patterns today, you don't always have to start at the beginning. If you keep messing up at the top, then start on the top. So in that E major, if you keep going, then stop doing that, right? That's not productive. Instead, start on the B. Or whatever, which is kind of just adding a note and progressively moving from that place of comfort, right? Then the B becomes more like a home. Like, I know that B, I've done it 6 times now. Any other general questions or general suggestions of practicing this easing up? It's great to see you all again tonight. Oh, was that a question, Rachel? Or okay. Next month, we will have a class. I don't yet know what day it is because I have almost confirmed that we're going to have a guest person doing it, but we haven't agreed on a date yet. Next month, the piece that we'll be doing is going to be one of the movements from Iroquois Suite by Herman Beeftink, and he will be offering every one of us 30% off his entire digital download website, which is amazing. It will be, though, a piece of music that we aren't doing for free, and I do apologize, we're not doing something that's completely free, but you can buy just the one movement, and with the 30% off, I think it was like $3.12 or something like that. So I hope that that will be something that people will find to be accessible enough to still want to participate. People are loving Herman Beeftink. I think last time we did his piece 3 years ago, I think we did it, or 4 years ago, we did one in 2021 or 2. He gave us a 30% off coupon, and I think a lot of people just bought like everything he had published. At least I know at least 3 people who bought everything he had published at the time. So he's got more works up there now. So I'll share that code out probably once I get this video posted too, since we announced that we'll be doing a movement of Herman Beeftink's Iroquois Suite, and he'll be giving us a code for 30% off. Unless, did I already put the code out there somewhere? I don't remember if I did or not. All right, and so again, thank you, Gary Schocker, for this piece. Thank you, Flute World, for still offering 10% off the rest of Gary Schocker's compositions and any accessories that you might like. Just your next Flute World order, type in Allison 2025 for 10% off sheet music and accessories. There is no limit to that. And last I checked, it may have ended, but they had in their clearance section a lot of Gary Schocker pieces. The amazing thing about Gary Schocker is he's written a lot of music. The hard thing for retailers is if they want to keep their bookshelves full of fresh pieces, they sometimes have to move some off. So there might at Flute World also be some more of his 300 compositions for flute that you haven't played yet, and I think all of them are worth checking out. So keep browsing, keep playing, and of course keep posting in Solo of the Month. And I'll look forward to continue to hear all of you as we go forward. Thanks again, everyone, for being here tonight.
Thank you.